Maya traced the elegant curve of a new serif font on her tablet, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. From the outside, her studio, Artisan Graphics, was an unassuming brick-and-mortar space tucked away on a quieter street in Austin, Texas. Inside, however, it was a testament to a decade of relentless dedication. The walls were a gallery of her triumphs, award-winning posters for local festivals, sleek branding packages for tech startups that had since hit the big time, and the delicate, intricate packaging for a chocolatier that had gone viral on social media. Every single success was a brick she had laid herself, building a life far removed from her origins in a small, blue-collar town where graphic design was a foreign concept. She juggled 2, sometimes 3, waitressing jobs to put herself through design school, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an unshakable belief in her own eye for beauty and balance. Those years were her foundation, a constant reminder of the value of hard work and the grit it took to turn a dream into a thriving business. Today, however, a new and potentially lucrative client was due, one that could elevate Artisan Graphics to a national stage. Elysian Living, a new luxury lifestyle brand, was launching in 6 months, and they needed a logo, a visual soul for their high-end homewares and curated experiences. The potential was enormous. The bell above the door chimed, announcing their arrival. A woman who could only be Victoria Davenport swept in, followed by 2 nervous-looking assistants. Victoria was the human equivalent of a luxury price tag, draped in a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Maya's first car, with hair so perfectly coiffed it seemed immune to the Texas humidity. Her title was Director of Marketing, but industry whispers said her primary qualification was being the daughter of the primary investor. "So this is it," Victoria said, her eyes scanning the studio with a barely concealed air of disappointment. It wasn't the sprawling, glass-walled agency she was clearly accustomed to. "It's quaint." Maya stood, extending a hand with a professional smile. "Victoria, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Maya. Welcome to Artisan Graphics." Victoria's handshake was limp and brief. She ignored the portfolio Maya had carefully laid out on the large oak conference table and instead drifted towards a wall displaying a series of logos Maya had designed for a beloved local coffee chain. "I saw your work for The Daily Grind," she remarked, her tone laced with a faint, dismissive amusement. "My barista has one of their travel mugs." The implication was clear: you design for coffee shops. "We are Elysian." "They were a wonderful client," Maya said, her smile not faltering. "We helped them triple their market share within a year of the rebrand." "Impressive," Victoria said, the words sounding utterly unimpressed. "But Elysian is a different stratosphere. We're not selling coffee and croissants. We are selling an aspiration. An exclusive lifestyle. We need a logo that whispers wealth, not community spirit." For the next hour, Victoria described her vision in a series of vague, pretentious buzzwords. It had to be timeless but modern, minimalist yet impactful, approachable but unattainable. She rejected every one of Maya's initial concepts, which were based on the extensive brief her own team had provided. "No, no," she'd say, waving a dismissive hand. "This feels too commercial. Too pedestrian. It needs to feel like old money." Finally, they landed on a concept that Victoria seemed to remotely tolerate, a clean, elegant monogram that Maya felt had real potential. Then came the discussion of the fee. Maya presented her standard project proposal, detailing the phases of work and the cost, a figure that was industry standard for a brand of this scale. Victoria let out a short, sharp laugh as if Maya had told a particularly audacious joke. "For a logo? That's darling. But it's completely out of the question." She leaned forward, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, condescending tone. "Let's be realistic. You're a small local shop. This project is a major opportunity for you. The exposure alone is worth more than this fee." She named a number that was less than half of Maya's quote. It was an insult. "Victoria," Maya said, her voice firm but even. "My price reflects the quality of my work, the value I bring to a brand, and my years of experience. I've built my business on providing that value, and my clients, from coffee shops to tech firms, have seen the return on that investment." Victoria's eyes narrowed. The feigned politeness vanished, replaced by a cold, hard edge. "And what experience is that exactly?" "Waiting tables to pay for art school." She picked up the proposal, her manicured nails tapping against Maya's printed name. "I know your type. You scrape your way into a world you don't belong in, and then you think you can charge the same as people who were born into it. Consider our offer. Frankly, for the prestige of having Elysian in your portfolio, you should be paying us." The air crackled with tension. Maya felt a familiar heat rise in her chest. The same feeling she'd had when customers would snap their fingers at her for a coffee refill. She had fought too hard and worked too long to be spoken to like that. But this was a professional setting. She was the owner, the founder, the creative director. She took a deep breath. The proposal stands, Maya said calmly. If the budget is a concern, perhaps Elysian isn't in a position to invest in a premium brand identity just yet. Victoria stared at her aghast before a smirk spread across her face. We'll see about that. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. We'll be in touch. As the door chimed their exit, Maya sank into her chair, the silence of the studio pressing in on her. The conflict had been drawn, not with a bang, but with the quiet, cutting condescension of a woman who believed a person's worth was printed on their birth certificate, not earned through talent and sweat. Against all odds, Elysian Living signed the contract. Maya learned from one of Victoria's assistants in a hushed, apologetic phone call that the other board members had been unimpressed with the alternative agencies, all large, expensive, and traditional, and had been captivated by Maya's portfolio. They overrode Victoria's objections, forcing her to proceed with artisan graphics. The victory felt hollow as it marked the beginning of 3 months of professional torment. Victoria proved to be the quintessential nightmare client. She demanded daily progress reports, only to ignore them. She would approve a color palette on Monday, only to send a scathing email on Wednesday asking why Maya had chosen such garish shades. Her feedback was a masterclass in passive aggression, filled with phrases like, "I'm not sure someone with your background can grasp the nuance here," or, "Let's try to elevate this, shall we?" Every interaction was a subtle reminder of Victoria's disdain. She treated Maya not as a creative partner, but as a digital laborer, a pair of hands to execute her whims. Yet, through it all, Maya remained steadfastly professional. She documented every change, patiently explained every design choice, and shielded her own small team from the worst of Victoria's condescension. She was determined not to let this woman's bitterness compromise the quality of the work. The logo became more than just a project, it was a matter of principle. Maya poured all her expertise and creative energy into it, refining the elegant monogram until it was flawless. It was clean, evocative, and radiated the exact, aspirational quality Victoria had so vaguely demanded. It was, Maya knew with quiet certainty, one of the best pieces of work her studio had ever produced. The night of the Elysian Living launch party was a spectacle of calculated opulence. Held in a minimalist, white-walled art gallery downtown, the event was swarming with Austin's elite, tech billionaires, society mavens, and influential media personalities. Champagne flowed, a string quartet played softly in the corner, and on every available surface, from the cocktail napkins to the ice sculptures, was the logo. Her logo. Projected onto a giant screen behind the main stage, it was breathtaking. It commanded the room with a quiet, confident grace, and Maya felt a surge of pride that momentarily eclipsed the memory of the struggle to create it. She had been invited via a generic vendor Evite, a clear afterthought. Dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, she felt a world away from the Chanel-clad crowd. She stayed on the periphery, observing, content to let the work speak for itself. And it did. People were mesmerized. She overheard snippets of conversation. Absolutely stunning, perfectly captures the brand. Who is the designer? Genius. The buzz grew until it was time for Victoria to take the stage for the official unveiling. She glided to the podium, basking in the applause, her smile as bright and blinding as the spotlights. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the birth of Elysian Living," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "Building this brand has been a labor of love. A journey of passion to bring a new standard of luxury to the world. It required a singular vision, a refusal to compromise on perfection." As she spoke, Maya noticed a well-known journalist, a sharp woman named Alice Chun from the prestigious Design Forward magazine, making notes. Alice's eyes were fixed on the logo projected behind Victoria. After the speech, as Victoria mingled, Alice made a beeline for her. "Victoria, a triumph," Alice said, her voice crisp and professional. "Everyone is talking about the logo. It's a masterstroke of branding. You must tell me about the creative genius who designed it." This was the moment. Maya's heart beat a little faster. She took a half-step forward, ready to be acknowledged. Victoria let out a light, tinkling laugh. "Oh, it's sweet of you to ask. It was a deeply personal process for me. I had the concept locked in my mind for years. It was simply a matter of finding someone to execute." She scanned the crowd and her eyes landed on Maya. A cruel, triumphant glint appeared in them. In fact, our little freelancer is here tonight. Maya dear, come over here. The use of freelancer was a deliberate sting. Maya walked forward, her head held high, a polite, professional smile fixed on her face. Alice, it's a pleasure to see you again, Maya said, having met the journalist at a design conference years ago. My studio, Artisan Graphics, was the creative agency for the project. Victoria placed a proprietary hand on Maya's arm, her grip surprisingly tight. Maya was an absolute godsend, she continued, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. She has such a wonderful work ethic. You know, she used to be a waitress before she got into this. So she's just brilliant at taking orders. A few of Victoria's sycophantic friends nearby snickered. The air grew thick with unspoken judgment. Alice Chen's professional smile tightened. Victoria wasn't finished. She turned to the small group that had gathered, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I had a very, very specific and demanding vision. It was a struggle to find someone who could follow instructions without letting their own limited perspective get in the way. But Maya, she was very obedient. She did exactly as I told her, and for that, I'm grateful. The humiliation washed over Maya in a hot, suffocating wave. In a few calculated sentences, Victoria had stripped her of all creative ownership, reframing her as an unthinking, order-taking subordinate. She had painted her hard-earned past as a mark of servility, erasing the decade of grit, talent, and entrepreneurial spirit. She was no longer a successful business owner, an award-winning designer. In the eyes of this crowd, she was just the help, a former waitress who got lucky. Maya felt her voice tremble but forced it into a calm, steady tone. That's an interesting interpretation of the creative process, Victoria. In fact, the monogram concept was one of several original designs my team and I developed and presented. And it was only after my explicit and detailed feedback that it became what you see today. Victoria retorted smoothly, patting Maya's arm before releasing it as if she were dismissing a servant. She turned her dazzling smile back to the journalist. Now, Alice, let me walk you through the new collection. Victoria steered the journalist away, leaving Maya standing alone in the center of the room. The string quartet seemed to swell, its cheerful music a mocking soundtrack to her degradation. People looked at her, some with pity, some with a faint smirk, before turning back to their conversations. She was isolated, invisible, her greatest professional triumph twisted into a weapon of public shame. Her creation was being celebrated, but the creator had been erased. Maya stood frozen, the ambient chatter of the party fading into a dull roar in her ears. Each beat of the music felt like a hammer blow to her pride. To be dismissed so cruelly, to have her work stolen and her story warped in front of her peers, was a unique kind of violation. She was just about to turn and slip out of the gallery, to escape the pitying and contemptuous looks, when a calm, authoritative voice cut through the noise. It's more than a masterstroke, Alice. It's award-winning. The voice belonged to Julian Croft, a man who needed no introduction in Austin or indeed in most of the tech and design world. A self-made billionaire who had started his software empire in a garage, he was legendary for his razor-sharp intellect and his utter intolerance for phonies. He was dressed in a simple dark gray suit that was probably more expensive than Victoria's Chanel but made none of its desperate noise. He had been standing near a sculpture, observing, and now he stepped forward, his eyes holding a look of quiet intensity. Victoria, who had been leading Alice away, turned back, her smile faltering slightly at the sight of him. Julian Croft was not a man you dismissed. Julian, I didn't know you were here, she gushed, instantly shifting into fawning mode. I'm so glad you like the branding. Julian's gaze was fixed, not on Victoria but on Maya. He gave a small, respectful nod. Maya, isn't it? Of Artisan Graphics. I've been following your work for some time. Your rebranding of the Hill Country Conservancy was brilliant. But this, he gestured to the massive logo projected on the wall. This is a truly exceptional piece of design. Maya could only manage a stunned quiet. Thank you. So, I'm not surprised it won, Julian continued, his voice carrying easily in the sudden lull in conversation. People were turning to listen. Julian Croft didn't speak often at these events, but when he did, it was always worth hearing. Victoria's eyes widened. Won? What did it win? She asked, a confused but pleased expression on her face, assuming the credit would flow to her. The International Golden Seraph Award, Julian stated plainly. It's one of the most prestigious anonymous submission design awards in the world. The judging panel, of which I am a part, made its decision last month. We were unanimous. The only problem was we couldn't figure out who the designer was. The submission was credited only to Elysian Living. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Alice Chen's pen was flying across her notepad. We've spent the last 4 weeks trying to track down the artist, Julian went on, his gaze finally shifting to Victoria, now cold and sharp as splintered ice. We wanted to celebrate them at the annual gala in Geneva next month. Imagine my surprise when I hear you telling Ms. Chun that you were the visionary, and Ms. Daniels here was just your obedient helper. Victoria's face went pale, the carefully applied blush suddenly standing out in stark, clownish patches. I led the project, she stammered, her voice a pitch higher than usual. I was the creative force behind it. Maya simply brought it to life. Julian raised a single unimpressed eyebrow. That's fascinating. Because the initial drafts of the winning design bear a striking resemblance to a pro bono logo Ms. Daniels designed 2 years ago for a women's shelter. A logo that is featured prominently in her public portfolio. This Elysian monogram isn't just her work. It is a clear and brilliant evolution of her own established, signature style. An artist's voice is like a fingerprint, Ms. Davenport. And the fingerprints are all Maya's. He took out his phone, and with a few quick taps, brought up a side-by-side comparison of the shelter's logo and the new Elysian mark. It was undeniable. The DNA was the same, the elegant lines, the clever use of negative space, the sophisticated weighting. He held it up for Alice and the now-rapt audience to see. Furthermore, Julian continued, his tone utterly merciless, the award submission included a detailed creative brief outlining the entire design philosophy. It spoke of grit, of building beauty from humble beginnings, of inner strength. It was a powerful narrative. It just doesn't sound very much like your story, does it, Victoria? It sounds a great deal like the story of a talented woman who waitressed her way through school to build her own celebrated company from the ground up. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was on Victoria, who looked as if the floor had dissolved beneath her feet. The snobbery, the confidence, the Chanel suit, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a small, exposed woman gasping for air. She had been caught in a lie so audacious, so complete, that there was no way to talk her way out of it. Julian Croft turned his back on her, a final brutal dismissal. He faced Maya, his expression softening into one of genuine admiration. Maya, on behalf of the Golden Seraph Committee, I would be honored if you would accept the award. And I would be even more honored if we could discuss having Artisan Graphics consult on my company's new European branding campaign. We need real talent. Not just a vision but the skill to bring it to life. The reversal was total and breathtaking. The room erupted in a murmur of hushed conversation. But it was a different sound now. The pitying looks directed at Maya had transformed into expressions of awe and respect. The snickers aimed at her past were replaced by a stunned silence at her achievement. She wasn't the waitress who got lucky. She was the internationally acclaimed designer who had just been publicly vindicated and headhunted by a billionaire, all in the same breath. The spotlight that Victoria had so desperately craved was now shining squarely on Maya. And for the first time that evening, she felt its warmth. The aftermath of Julian Croft's revelation was like a dam breaking. The forced, polite atmosphere of the party gave way to a wave of genuine excitement and frantic networking. But the target had shifted. It was no longer Victoria, the disgraced heiress, but Maya, the newly crowned design queen. People who had looked straight through her an hour earlier were now eagerly pushing their way forward, hands outstretched, showering her with praise and congratulations. An incredible story, a venture capitalist boomed, pressing his card into her hand. My firm is always looking for authentic talent to back. Your style is simply divine, a local art curator gushed. We must exhibit your work. Alice Chun, the journalist, approached with a look of profound professional respect. Maya, I am so sorry you were subjected to that, she said sincerely. But what a story. Not about Elysian but about you. May I have an exclusive interview? Our readers need to hear about the real force behind that logo. Maya, still slightly dazed but grounded by the familiar weight of a new project, agreed. She felt a profound sense of whiplash, a dizzying ascent from the depths of humiliation to this pinnacle of recognition. The most gratifying moment came when her phone buzzed with a message from her lead designer back at the studio. It was a screenshot of their team group chat, which had exploded with celebratory emojis and messages of fierce loyalty. They had been watching a live stream, and their pride was palpable. "Our boss is a rock star." Reading that, Maya felt a warmth that no award or billionaire's endorsement could match. Across the gallery, Victoria Davenport was imploding. Her face was a mask of fury and shame. She tried to catch her father's eye, but the powerful investor turned his back on her, his expression stony with rage. He was already in a hushed, frantic conversation with the other board members. They weren't just angry about the lie, they were horrified by the business implications. She had insulted a designer who was not only a genius in her own right, but was now publicly championed by Julian Croft. She hadn't just been snobbish, she had been monumentally stupid. Victoria gathered what was left of her dignity and practically fled the gallery, a pariah at her own party. The next morning, the consequences were swift and brutal. The Elysian Living Board issued a formal public apology to Maya Daniels and Artisan Graphics, citing a gross misrepresentation of creative ownership by a now former employee. Victoria was unceremoniously fired, her title and expense account stripped away. The luxury brand she had tried to shape in her own image had ejected her completely. Later that week, a courier delivered a check to Maya's studio for the full, originally quoted amount of her invoice, along with a handwritten note of apology from Elysian's CEO. But that was all background noise now. The story of the Elysian launch party had gone viral in the design and business communities. Alice Chen's article titled "The Waitress, the Heiress, and the Logo That Exposed a Lie" became the magazine's most read piece of the year. Artisan Graphics was inundated with calls. Blue-chip companies from New York and multinational corporations from London all wanted the designer with the Golden Seraph Award and the stamp of approval from Julian Croft. True to his word, Julian's company drew up a multi-million-dollar contract for Maya's studio to spearhead their entire European expansion. It was a staggering opportunity, one that would guarantee her studio's future and elevate her to the global stage. A month later, Maya stood in her studio, which was now humming with a new energy. Blueprints for an expansion into the neighboring office space were laid out on the conference table. Her team had doubled. As she looked at the Golden Seraph trophy, which now sat proudly on her shelf, she didn't feel triumph over Victoria. She felt a deep, quiet sense of self-reaffirmation. Victoria was a symptom of a prejudice Maya had fought her entire life. The victory wasn't just in being proven right. It was in proving that her own values of hard work, integrity, and letting the quality of the work speak for itself were the ones that ultimately mattered. Her past wasn't a liability to be ashamed of. It was the bedrock of her character, the source of the very grit and perspective that Julian Croft had recognized in her work. The world had finally seen her not for where she came from, but for what she could create. And that was the only validation she had ever truly needed.